Next, we will move on to the Q&A session. We encourage all teachers and students to actively participate. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and our staff will bring you a microphone. If you feel shy about asking directly, you can write your question on a slip of paper and pass it to the front. Please prepare 1 or 2 questions per person and try to keep your questions concise and clear.
Hello, Master. I am a high school student who just graduated from the 3rd year. I'm about to enter university soon, and I have a question I'd really like to ask. Nowadays, both the media and the internet are absolutely filled with a lot of pornographic content, whether it's videos or news reports. They use pornography as a theme to attract all kinds of adults and young people through various media channels and platforms nowadays. There are also many explicit scenes in some movies that normalize such content widely. For example, in the West, there's the well-known film Titanic, which includes a scene where a woman is drawn nude. We know that in Western culture, throughout its long artistic history, beauty is often defined by the female nude form in various artworks. But in Chinese culture, beauty is found in landscapes. So right now, at this point in time, I'm really deeply conflicted. Is the female nude truly beautiful? Should the relationship between men and women today be so open and unrestricted in society? Some people also dress very revealingly, exposing their chests and breasts in public. They show off whatever they can, even enhancing their busts. I find all of this very confusing. Master, could you please enlighten me?
Well, my general view is this from what I have observed. Nowadays, whether it's the news media, television, or movies, both audio and video, it's all like this. There are often commercial motives behind it that prioritize profit over ethics and values in many cases. To attract people's attention, they'll use all kinds of methods without any moral restraint or consideration whatsoever in their commercial pursuits today. Generally speaking, if you look at Chinese history, it has been very civilized with strong ethical foundations and traditions. Even in our Tibetan region, people's behavior and dress have been quite conservative and modest. But now, under the influence of the West in recent decades of globalization, you could say that people in the cities have no reservations at all. Anything can be displayed openly, and people see this as a sign of success and liberation from traditional constraints somehow. But in fact, personally, I believe that the human body is, in truth, not something that is truly worth people's attachment or desire when examined from a deeper perspective and understanding. In Buddhism, it is taught that whether it's a woman's or a man's body, when analyzed through the 9 contemplations of impurity in Buddhist meditation practice carefully, no matter how beautiful your body may be, when you truly observe it with wisdom and clear understanding from within, all physical bodies are not to be clung to or obsessed over. Therefore, I think that in today's society, when it comes to issues of sexuality, people already have certain habitual tendencies in their mind stream. When these tendencies are triggered by external stimuli and influences around us in modern society daily, in order to attract or exploit this weakness, many in the business world use such methods to achieve their own goals. I think that actually, after a certain point in our development as a civilization here, humanity will eventually return to the state and traditions of ancient cultures. Because when people have had too much of it, they no longer desire it. When these things first started happening in Taiwan region, Japan and South Korea many years back then, the whole world was absolutely shocked. Everyone thought it was extremely rare. But now basically, even in many cities in mainland China, people have become accustomed to these things. They are seen as commonplace. In the end, these things have instead become a source of shame for humanity. So I believe that we, as human beings, must always have a genuine sense of shame and true remorse. Once people lose their sense of shame and their ability to feel remorse, there is really no meaningful difference between them and animals. So many traditions of ancient cultures are actually quite admirable from the perspective of later generations.
Respected Master, hello. I am 16 years old this year and am self-studying at home. I would like to ask you a question. Many Buddhists nowadays, they also approach things with the intention of helping others and offer advice to others. But their approach is something that young people find very hard to accept. They always bring up the idea of karma and retribution. I know that karma and retribution are reasonable concepts, but because of mistakes in our country's education and how ideas are guided, it makes people feel that this is very superstitious. So when many young people hear their advice, they often feel very confused or even slightly repulsed. Moreover, their advice also tends to be rather forceful. So at times, even though they have the intention to help others, it actually has the opposite effect. What many young people want to embrace now is something more artistic and idealistic. Buddhism, in many cases, is a kind of philosophy. For example, Zen thought is completely unconventional. So I want to ask, how can we popularize it among young people today? Is it possible to use a more purely philosophical or abstract approach in this context? To select those Buddhist concepts that bring people peace and joy and provide them with some education on these ideas? Or should we perhaps stick to a very rigid approach and traditional method and indoctrinate them strictly according to the scriptures? I really don't understand this point, so I'd appreciate some guidance from the Master. Thank you.
I think that the Buddhist law of cause and effect makes a lot of sense. You yourself admit is quite reasonable, don't you agree? Since you acknowledge that it is reasonable, I believe that if Buddhists preach it, there is nothing unreasonable about that, because it is the truth. This truth, whether for Buddhists or non-Buddhists, if someone explains it from a theoretical perspective, I think that if others really don't accept it, then that's truly their own shortcoming. However, I also want to clarify and emphasize that not all Buddhists are completely rigid, dogmatic, or present things in an abstract or overly theoretical way to everyone. In fact, Buddhism should indeed be versatile and multifaceted. Whether in the arts, in creative expression, or in other philosophical traditions and schools of thought, for example, in our Tibetan Buddhism, everyone acknowledges the existence of the 10 branches of science. Among these 10 branches, quite a few are closely connected with today's arts and with various modern academic disciplines in meaningful and profound ways today. I think nowadays, perhaps you yourself only see a few Buddhists using certain theories to numb others without genuine understanding or wisdom. And that's just a perception you have. In reality, in both the West and the East, including in the Tibetan region, Buddhist educational methods are highly open, inclusive, and diverse. Everyone's aptitude and way of thinking are different from one another in many respects. There are various skillful and expedient methods, and at such times these should be accepted with an open mind and heart. This includes the Chan culture within Chinese Buddhism today. After a while, I also engaged in exchanges with Peking University using Chan culture as a medium. On the surface, it seems that Chan Buddhism is about sitting quietly in a tranquil place, closing one's eyes and contemplating. But in reality, what is now called Chan can permeate every aspect of daily life. Whether walking, standing, sitting or lying down, or even when you're at work or commuting, at these times you can also abide in the principles of Chan Buddhism. You can operate within this state of clarity of mind as well. So, if we truly understand many of the important principles of Buddhism, and in addition, many eminent monks and great masters actively promote Buddhist concepts in various ways, I believe it is not rigid or inflexible. In fact, it is even more progressive, more forward-thinking than the current education system. Why is that? Nowadays, much of our education only values test scores. If your scores are good, that's all that matters. If your scores aren't good, then basically speaking, no matter how exceptional you are in other ways, you basically can't pass. It's just about your scores in your interview. If someone can speak and write well, but their thinking is poor or of low quality, they can still get through. But actually, Buddhism is not like this. When it comes to selecting talent in Buddhism, there are also many aspects such as debate and writing. It also includes many aspects such as their daily thoughts, morals, discipline, and behavior. So I think the concepts involved in Buddhism are actually very broad.
I am from Gansu University of Traditional Chinese Medicine, where I currently teach and conduct research. It is a great honor to attend your lecture and learn from the master here today in this wonderful setting. I work in traditional medicine and also study traditional culture. In the 1990s, I visited the Tibetan region twice and went to Gannan. I have also been to Labrang Monastery and Kumung Monastery in Qinghai. In the process of popularizing Tibetan medicine and monastic medicine in various regions I have visited over the years, which in Tibetan is called Menpa Chakhang, I would like to respectfully ask the Master, has the well-known Larungar Buddhist Academy offered any courses related to Tibetan medicine? Also, Tibetan medicine is an important component of Tibetan Buddhism. For example, Labrang Monastery has a special Tibetan medicine class at the Gannan Health School. This class is specifically intended for studying Tibetan medicine systematically. Additionally, our Gansu University of Chinese Medicine has established a Tibetan medicine department in Gannan. Now, as part of ethnic medicine, it has now officially started enrolling master's degree students. Master, could you please introduce to us some information about Tibetan medicine within the Tibetan Buddhist community? All right, thank you.
Actually, Tibetan medicine is one of the 5 major sciences in Tibetan Buddhism that have been studied for many centuries, traditionally throughout our history. Our academy is called Larung 5 Sciences Buddhist Academy, as you know. There is the science of logic, the science of language, and the science of medicine. Medicine refers to the science of healing, which should be medicine. There is also the science of inner knowledge, making a total of 5 sciences. Among the 5 sciences, what is called the science of medicine is what we now refer to as Tibetan medicine. Tibetan medicine, internationally speaking, is considered to be outstanding in its effectiveness and holistic approach to healing. As everyone knows, many Tibetan medical formulas today have been preserved through generations and are used by practitioners in various countries. And the methods of making Tibetan medicine are especially unique compared to other medical traditions around the world today. In our academy, there are scholars who specialize in research in this field with great expertise. Although I myself, after entering the Buddhist Academy, personally did not study much of it, when I was a young student, I was always especially interested in studying medicine. Moreover, regarding Tibetan medicine, including various aspects such as pulse diagnosis, preparing prescriptions, and even going up the mountains to find medicinal herbs, we Tibetans have a saying that the most skilled physician can turn every herb on the mountain into medicine, and all of them can be used to make prescriptions. Furthermore, in Tibetan region, medicinal resources are quite abundant with diverse plants growing at high altitudes naturally. Now, internationally, Tibetan region is known for 2 things, medicine and astronomy. In the earliest days of humanity, according to historical records we have today, various medical instruments, including those for performing surgery, existed in Tibetan region. I once went to Xining in Qinghai, and there is a museum near Xining where I saw some remarkable collections. Artifacts from several thousand years ago, with very advanced technical instruments from that time, are still preserved there. From these aspects we can see that the ancient people of Tibetan region were known to possess some truly very advanced and sophisticated medical technologies. In addition, nowadays in Tibetan Buddhism, whether it's what you just mentioned, the Menpa Chakhang is more commonly found in the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism. In the Nyingma school, as well as in other monasteries, there are also institutions that are quite similar to Menpa Chakhang. At our own Buddhist institute, we also specifically conduct research on such institutions, and over the years we have trained a considerable number of lamas. Additionally, we have established some collaborations with other health-related schools and higher-level medical colleges. In this regard, I think that when considering the situation for some of our current illnesses, it's not necessarily that we have to rely on Western medicine, nor do we have to use Chinese medicine. If we encounter Tibetan medicine, we should also carefully consider it as well. Because in fact, the formulas used in Tibetan medicine are not harmful to sentient beings. In some respects, it even possesses truly unique and specialized techniques that surpass those of both Chinese and Western medicine. That's why, when I get sick myself, I often prefer to take Tibetan medicine instead of others. On the one hand, it has no side effects. At the same time, in all aspects, the results are generally quite good for me overall. I hope that all of us, including the teacher who just spoke and other people in the academic community, will conduct thorough and detailed research on Tibetan medicine going forward. In Tibetan medicine, we have a specialized text called the Four Medical Tantras. Once you have mastered the Four Medical Tantras, it becomes quite easy to diagnose and treat others. Including self-treatment, it's not complicated. The basic concepts are easy to put into practice.
Hello, Master. I am a doctoral student in Tibetan Studies at the School of Ethnology, Lanzhou University. I am very grateful for your constant encouragement, which helped me get into this PhD program. I have 2 questions. My first question is, in Chinese philosophy, Confucianism is foundational, with its core in the theory of human nature. Within Confucianism, this theory is best shown by Mencius and Sunzi. Mencius believed in the inherent goodness of human nature, while Sunzi argued for its inherent evil. So, my first question is, how can we examine Confucian theories of human nature within Buddhist philosophy? My second question is about the theory of human nature in relation to this. Some scholars, when studying Buddhist scriptures, have also proposed the theory of Buddha nature. I've read some works on this topic, and their exploration of Buddha nature is based on the concept of the alaya consciousness. They regard the alaya consciousness as a kind of constant consciousness and believe that its nature is neither good nor evil, which forms the basis of their theory of Buddha nature. I'd like to ask you, because I feel that exploring Buddha nature only from the alaya consciousness perspective is not ultimate or complete. So could you briefly explain the theory of Buddha nature in its ultimate sense? And also, could you talk about the relationship between the theory of Buddha nature and human nature?
Actually, in some respects, the ideas of Confucianism and Buddhism should be considered to be quite similar. Both of these philosophies acknowledge the existence of a certain kind of nature that people have not yet fully discovered or understood, which is what they call nature or Sing. Some scholars use an analogy for this nature, comparing it to various different objects in a dark room. When there is no light, they go completely unnoticed. But once the light is turned on, you discover that there are all sorts of things inside when you examine closely with attention. According to Mencius and Junzi's views on nature, there are some differences compared to Buddhism when we analyze, because they focus only on whether human nature is inherently good or inherently evil. Even though within Confucianism itself, as we know from classical texts, there are 2 different perspectives. What we talk about in Buddhism from ultimate level is that in the true essence, neither good nor evil exists at the deepest level. You could say they are equal. But how can this be reconciled? Actually, in the ultimate essence, both good and evil are absent. It's like the origin of all things. Good and evil have already been transcended at that fundamental level of reality, beyond dualistic categories. What Buddhism teaches as the ultimate truth is that no matter what level of the world, including the mountains, rivers, and earth we see now, from the perspective of its true essence, good and evil, black and white, sunlight and moonlight, beyond all dualistic thinking entirely, none of these exist. Everything is completely free from any kind of conceptual elaboration. However, on the level of appearances, or how things seem to us, we should follow what the Buddha taught, that human nature is at its core fundamentally good. Why do we say this? Because people are able to attain enlightenment, and all sentient beings, without exception, possess Buddha nature. The reason for having Buddha nature, according to Buddhist teachings, is something you will understand only after studying texts like the Treatise on Buddha Nature and the Tathagatagarbha Sutra. Why is that? If human nature were inherently evil, then no matter how much we studied, in the end, we would only regress in our actions. But throughout history, there have been thousands upon thousands of true achievers and awakened beings. In the end, they all came to understand the true meaning of life. Take Shakyamuni Buddha as an example. Shakyamuni Buddha reached the highest state of the inherent goodness of human nature. The sixth patriarch also did the same, and in Tibetan Buddhism there are countless such individuals as well. Therefore, when a person's true nature is fully revealed, it manifests in accordance with principles and laws, showing its original goodness. In Chan Buddhism, it is said to illuminate the mind and see one's true nature. Only when one illuminates the mind and sees their true nature does one realize that the truly good aspect of one's nature has already been revealed. In this regard, Confucianism is somewhat lacking. I have great respect and admiration for Confucianism in terms of how it teaches people to conduct themselves and interact with others. But what are they relatively deficient or lacking in this particular context? They have not explored the afterlife of human beings, nor have they conducted a detailed analysis of the emptiness of the essence of things. They focus only on daily life, only on behavior in practical worldly matters here. In terms of behavioral norms, they have many teachings that are worth our learning. If you understand both Confucianism and Buddhism and calmly compare the two viewpoints with an open mind without bias or prejudice. Then, regarding Buddhism, including the ultimate emptiness and conventional appearances, only when you conduct in-depth research in this area will you realize, oh, so this is where the misunderstandings lie and where the similarities and differences between them are. At that moment, everything instantly became clear.
Homage to Khenpo Sodargye. Hello. I am from the School of Science at Lansio University. I would like to ask a few questions about the teacher-student relationship because it is especially important in Buddhism. My first question is about an article by Khenpo Sherab Zangpo titled, "Everyone is my teacher." The main idea in the article is that the people around us, even our own disciples, or ordinary people, even those who are not Buddhists, sometimes or occasionally, what they say or do can actually be enlightening for our own Buddhist practice. So he says that everyone is my teacher. However, I have also read in some articles that for beginners, since it is easy to develop wrong views, it's better to have fewer teachers to rely on. How should we really reconcile these two perspectives?
Among any three people, there is likely to be one who can be my teacher. So I think, in my experience, if in all aspects of one's own practice, one regards everything others say as a lesson for oneself with humility and openness, such a person, no matter what kind of behavior they have, should become my teacher. For example, when someone scolds me, I don't think just because this person pointed out my faults and criticized me that I should retaliate in the same manner or hold resentment in my heart against them. I don't do that. When others criticize me, I take their words as criticism, guidance, instruction, or even reprimand for myself. In this way, they also become my teacher, in a sense, in my life as well. But if I don't have such a level of practice, then whenever someone says anything about me, it's not just criticism to me. Even if they praise me, I might instead feel that this person is deliberately flattering me. In this way, it's possible that no one, not even your teacher, truly becomes your real teacher. Some schools are like this. After the teacher finishes the lesson in class, the students go back to their dormitories and start imitating the teacher like crazy. This teacher is so bad at teaching. Today in class they said this and that. They treat the teacher as simply a toy, as merely an object for their performance. Then they start acting like the teacher themselves. In this case, the teacher might not end up being your teacher either. So it really depends on ourselves, whether we can take everything others say and use it to point out our strengths and weaknesses. If there are good points, I will keep working hard and build on them. If they point out my shortcomings, I will correct my mistakes if I have any. With this mindset of openness and receptivity to learning from all, I think everyone can be my teacher. But if you can't do this yourself, then not to mention everyone in the world, even a true teacher with great wisdom and compassion for you, may not be of benefit to you. I often think about the Confucian idea that among three people, someone can be my teacher. That's actually a high level of realization. In Buddhism, we talk about observing a pure mind. In the past, Atisha also said that among three people, one of them is a bodhisattva. But among so many people, we often fail to see this. The standards and realization of a bodhisattva are very high. However, if my own perception and visualization are good, everyone here is a bodhisattva, you could say that. But if my ability to perceive and understand is poor, then everyone here would just seem like ordinary people who are even worse than me. In that case, in my life, they would only bring me suffering, and there would be no happiness at all. So the key is to look at your own mind, how you recognize, perceive, or acknowledge others. Let's analyze it from this perspective.
Master, I'm a bit slow, so I need to ask another question if you don't mind me taking your time. For example, I've studied with some teachers before or read their books. Later on, some of these teachers spoke disparagingly about Vajrayana Buddhism in their lectures and writings to their students. So how should we view teachers who once taught the true Dharma, but also slandered the Buddha's teachings either out of ignorance or from sectarian bias and misunderstanding?
I think it's like this. Up to now, in my experience, I've also encountered many people who slander Vajrayana. But those who slander Vajrayana, actually, they just don't understand Vajrayana. Whether they are teachers or other intellectuals, when they slander Vajrayana, it's really because they don't understand the true original teachings of Vajrayana. We should say that they don't really understand it very well. If that weren't the case, then the so-called Vajrayana, which is not a simple subject, is certainly not something that just anyone can readily slander or criticize. If you were to study what's called Vajrayana over a long period of time, just like the vast and immeasurable ocean of Tantras and the many extensive, detailed commentaries that exist in Tibetan Buddhism today, if these teachers were to carefully and thoroughly study all of them, even after more than 10 years, you might still not fully understand the content within. Once you truly understand it, you'll be left speechless. At that point, you'll completely realize, oh, my previous thinking was so ignorant, so trivial. You'll come to understand this. Why? Because what is taught in Vajrayana is not something that a university professor or an ordinary person in the world can comprehend. At first, Master Hongyi and some eminent figures in Chinese Han Buddhism did not understand Vajrayana. But later, when they truly studied the Tantras of Vajrayana and the profound teachings of some great masters, they would also repent on their own. So for these teachers, because of their environment and the friends around them, and also perhaps because they themselves have never been exposed to Vajrayana, if you truly and genuinely have the capability or ability to slander Vajrayana, I actually hope that these teachers should go to Tibetan Buddhist institutes and have an open and respectful debate with these Buddhists. In this process, you will discover for yourself whether you truly have the ability to refute them or not. If you can actually refute them, then Tibetan Buddhism will not deny it either. So I often sincerely hope that these people, ideally, we could truly serve as translators and have some real, face-to-face, very intense and meaningful debates in the monasteries. At that point, you might realize that you don't even fully understand the basic three conditions of Buddhist logic and reasoning. Yet you still speak out like this. It's really overestimating yourself, and you might feel quite ashamed.
Master, if you do not mind, I have another question, please, at this moment. Faith in the Guru and the Three Jewels is especially important in Buddhism. But as a beginner, I have to admit that it's really very difficult to develop stable and unwavering faith. Do you have any good advice in this regard?
I think there are two ways to develop faith in the Guru and the Three Jewels. One way is related to karmic connections from past lives. If you practice virtuous deeds and engaged in good actions in previous lives, then in this life it is not very difficult to give rise to faith. Another way is to read the biographies of eminent monks and great masters from the past. At the same time, you should also study Buddhism very diligently yourself. In the 400 verses on the Middle Way, it is said, if there are aspects of Buddhist teachings that are obscure to you, and if you feel confused or perhaps really don't understand, you should first look at the teachings on emptiness in Buddhism. The teachings on emptiness can only be expounded by the Buddha. Only his truly penetrating wisdom can perceive and discern them with complete clarity. So at this point you will realize, oh indeed, the teachings on emptiness are not easy to understand. No truly wise person in the world is able to clearly articulate such deeply profound principles. At this point, you will understand the profound meaning within. naturally you will develop unwavering faith in the three jewels and the Buddha.
His Holiness once said reciting the aspiration of Samantabhadra 1,000 times brings great merit and encouraged everyone to do so. Now that he has passed away, can we still aspire to recite it 1,000 times?
Of course you can do that.
Homage to the greatly kind Guru. Respected Guru, hello. I am a sophomore student and have been studying Buddhism for 2 years. In my studies of my major courses in Buddhism, I always feel that I can't reasonably arrange the time for both studies. May I ask, Guru, how should I reasonably arrange time for both? Should I, like other diligent Dharma brothers and sisters, recite multiple sutras or mantras? I ask for your guidance, Guru. Thank you.
I think that, in my opinion, one's major and the study of Buddhism are actually not in conflict at all. Time is like what Mr. Lu Xun said, like squeezing water from a sponge. You can always squeeze out some time for yourself, no matter how busy you are with your schedule currently. While studying your major and fulfilling your academic obligations here at school, you can use the mornings, evenings, or any extra time you have. I think you should be able to study then with dedication and discipline daily. If you have enough energy, you should recite many sutras. Because in Chinese Han Buddhism today, there is truly not enough research on the Buddhist scriptures. Many people just pile up the Tripitaka in their study, but do not explore and study more deeply into it. I especially hope that some people in the intellectual community will take a look at the treasure trove of wisdom that Shakyamuni Buddha left us over 2,500 years ago. As long as future generations take a look, they will be filled with joy. The benefits it brings us are endless and inexhaustible.
Thank you, Master. There is also another question. Homage to kind Master. Kenpo, may I ask, how should we view extramarital affairs? What are their causes and effects?
Actually, in this world, there are countless behaviors like this happening every day around us constantly. According to what is taught in the Buddha's Sutra of the 10 Wholesome Ways of Action, which is an essential text for understanding ethics, the various karmic consequences of such actions are explained very clearly in great detail, with specific examples provided there for our learning and guidance today. So I hope this student can, when you have time, read the Ekotara Agama Sutra, or the Sigalovada Sutra, and the Sutra of the 10 Wholesome Ways of Action. The profound causes and effects that are discussed within these important Buddhist texts will also become clear to you, allowing for a deeper understanding.
Thank you, Master. There is another student's question. He says, homage to kind Master. Are there any effective methods for us to break through self-attachment? Thank you, Master.
As for the various methods and approaches to break self-attachment, Master Shantideva thoroughly explains from two main aspects: discerning and realizing the non-self of persons and the non-self of phenomena in the 9th chapter of the Bodhicariyavatara. When we analyze our body, including hair and teeth, if we dissect the entire body part by part, none of it is truly me. Everything external that I am attached to is also not me. Using this particular method to break through is considered the best and most effective kind of theoretical analysis. Or, as Chan Buddhism teaches, one may ask, who am I? Who is reciting the Buddha's name? Using such a profound topic is called investigating the Huatu. Using the careful investigation of the Huatu to strike at and shatter attachment to the self is a method of practice. In our Tibetan Vajrayana tradition, there are also questions like, where is the self, and who is it that goes to the east? Through this approach, one eventually comes to understand for oneself that what sentient beings are attached to never truly existed, yet they cling to it as if it does. Clinging to a self where there is none, one comes to realize that in fact there never was a self. This principle becomes clear. Of course, this principle, as I just mentioned earlier in my talk today, can only give rise to genuine faith after long-term study of Buddhism. Actually, if we haven't studied the teachings deeply and thoroughly enough yet, I see that your environment is also quite limited in terms of access to Buddhist resources. However, nowadays, many students in Han regions are asking questions about Buddhism and showing a strong interest in Buddhist topics, which is quite good. When I visit some schools in Tibetan areas sometimes, originally Tibetans are a people whose entire ethnicity believes in Buddhism, But now it appears that many young people living there are not as capable as you. You, to a certain extent, have a genuine interest in Buddhism. There are research institutions and various aspects involved in this field. However, at present, many young Tibetans unfortunately lack both the confidence and the insight that are needed in this area. I find this situation rather puzzling. So when I visit some Tibetan schools, I also sincerely encourage them to study Buddhism seriously. Originally, Buddhism in Tibetan area was flourishing. But nowadays, it seems that many young people are truly only obsessed with the idea of money. In their minds, apart from love and money, there's no room for anything else. This is very sad. It's truly the tragedy of youth. Of course, as we grow older, everyone will inevitably have their own worries and attachments, but we cannot base all of our values in life solely on these things. If we do, then that person will not have a bright and promising future ahead of them. So for all of us gathered here today, especially the university students, while you are currently studying now, you must make the pursuit of truth your top priority. Other things are not important to you at the moment.
Thank you, Master.
Respected Khenpo, thank you very much for giving us such an invigorating and refreshing lecture, especially in the heat of the summer season. I am also from Gansu University of Chinese Medicine, majoring in traditional Chinese medicine. Just now, listening to your lecture, you mentioned Byron Katie. I actually noticed that your range of knowledge is extremely broad, so I'd like to ask you a question. What are your thoughts or opinions on Byron Katie's method called The Work? Also, Byron Katie has written several books. One of them is called 1,000 Names for Joy. The subtitle is Living in Harmony with the Way Things Are, a dialogue with the Tao Te Ching. I'd also like to recommend it to you. If you have time, you might want to take some time to look at it. Another thing is that throughout history, there have been many religions and beliefs in the world. Especially in this modern era, how can we find common ground and foster understanding among different religions and beliefs? How can each and every one of us play a better role in this world? How can we minimize or reduce the opposition and conflict between different religions and beliefs? I'd like to hear your thoughts and seek your advice on these issues. Could you give us some guidance? Thank you.
Actually, I think that before Byron Katie wrote these books, she had already gone through many hardships and challenges in her own life. This included her struggle with depression, which deeply affected her emotional well-being, as well as various family troubles and difficulties that she faced over the years. These were impactful problems that influenced her perspective. However, later on, through a great deal of thoughtful reflection and careful introspection, she gradually came to realize that all the complaints and desires she used to have in her life were actually not entirely reasonable states of mind upon reflection. Later, in the process of self-observation and self-reflection, she experienced something very much like what Buddhism calls awakening or enlightenment through her own contemplative practice and inner journey there. Although she herself never claimed that this was a Buddhist enlightenment, in some respects I really agree with her ideas. And in her books, she talks about people who have failed in relationships or experienced other difficulties, who can't pay their rent, all kinds of people who, after receiving her guidance and going through her process step by step with her support and encouragement, people's suffering in their hearts was completely relieved in remarkable and transformative ways for them. In Buddhism, we say that as long as the suffering of sentient beings is alleviated, any action that successfully achieves this objective can and should be acknowledged and recognized. That is why I am emphasizing that her philosophy, along with the books you just mentioned, as well as several other notable works she has written, are now widely read and appreciated not only throughout the United States, but also in China. A growing number of people have expressed that they have benefited greatly from her ideas. I've also spoken with some people who are not Buddhists in the past, and they told me that they actually gained a lot from reading it. Later on, I decided to read it myself, and after I finished reading it, I found that some of the ideas are indeed worth recommending to many young people in today's fast-paced and demanding world we live in, because many young people often find themselves in a state of suffering, even though you might have originally thought that life was beautiful and joyful. But in the end, as you go through life, you keep failing to reach your goals. And at that point, you feel very confused. So some time ago, I also wrote Suffering is Life as the title for a book. Many people thought that such a title shouldn't be used for a Buddhist text meant to inspire others. As a Buddhist, one should lead people into realms of light, happiness, and well-being rather than emphasize suffering so directly. At the time, I joked with some people, because the underlying emotional tone of our lives is actually suffering, it's best for people to know that for humans, suffering is more common. When we are experiencing suffering, we shouldn't try to run away from it. Instead, we should face it calmly and accept it just as it is. When you are able to accept suffering and know the right method, you will find that you won't suffer. If you have very high hopes and originally thought that life was always beautiful and joyful, but then, if you encounter a lot of suffering in the world, many people can't handle it and may even commit suicide without proper understanding or guidance to help them. So I said, it doesn't matter if this book doesn't sell well. No matter what, I still want to call it Suffering is Life. I think that many people also come to understand things through this way, perhaps in a similar manner. As human beings, we shouldn't just seek happiness. We also need to have a plan in our hearts, knowing that there will definitely be a lot of suffering in life. How do we face this suffering, and how do we accept it in our lives without being overwhelmed by it? And as for your second question just now about different religions and non-religious people, in this 21st century, I think we should understand each other with open minds and hearts free from prejudice. This is how it should be in Buddhism. No matter who it is, it's fine if they accept Buddhism, and it's also fine if they don't accept Buddhism. It's a very inclusive way of thinking that embraces diversity and different perspectives openly. So in our world today, non-Buddhists shouldn't see Buddhists and attribute all faults to them, pointing fingers at these Buddhists for this and that based on stereotypes. Even if non-Buddhists happen to commit very grave sins, people often try their best to cover them up. And Buddhists also go out of their way to look for faults in non-Buddhists or people of other religions. This kind of behavior is unreasonable. Every religion in the world has managed to survive up to this day because of its long and enduring history. It possesses its own vitality, its own unique energy, and its own special appeal. Therefore, I believe that when it comes to people of other religions or those without any religion, we should always have mutual respect, honor, and understanding, and strive to learn from each other. Only in this way can humanity make progress. If we are all mutually antagonistic, like water and fire, it's very likely that even our own religion may not have a place to survive. Therefore, in the 21st century, with such advanced networks and information, things are not necessarily as we imagine them to be. If we want to slander or reject a religion, we should first make sure that we really understand its essence and core beliefs very thoroughly, just as I mentioned earlier. If some people want to slander Vajrayana Buddhism, you'd better first understand it thoroughly. At the very least, you should spend 5 or 6 years specifically studying Vajrayana. Then if you still have the ability to criticize it, that's acceptable. In the same way, if I want to reject any religion or non-religious ideology, at the very least, I should first study it in detail before I have the right to speak about it. If I haven't done so and lack real knowledge of the subject matter, then, as Shakespeare once said, never slander a field you know nothing about or make judgments without proper understanding. Otherwise, you may have to pay for your mistakes with your own life. Such actions are also very dishonorable for an individual.
Venerable Master, greetings. I'm especially interested in the Dharma of emptiness, the teaching that all phenomena appear yet lack inherent existence. Since things have no inherent nature, how can we practice and familiarize ourselves with the non-dual Dharma of emptiness in our daily lives? When circumstances arise, if we do not cling or become attached to appearances, by gradually practicing in this way, can we ultimately realize the true emptiness? Thank you.
Actually, the phenomena of all things that we see now, their essence is emptiness, but their appearance is not empty. For example, physicists also believe that in terms of its appearance, a bottle is a bottle. But in reality, its essence is made up of atoms, molecules, atomic nuclei, and even quarks. This is its actual composition. If we truly want to reach such a state, ordinary physicists do not tell us how to realize or attain this experientially. But in Buddhism it is explained, not only theoretically recognizing that the essence of all phenomena does not truly exist, but even when we search to the very end, we find that even so-called emptiness itself cannot be grasped. Of course, this understanding requires long-term practice with patience and perseverance, since we have been conditioned by all kinds of grasping at reality since beginningless time. Our mind stream is already filled with these habits. Only after a long period of habituation and practice can we finally and truly reach the state of no self, the state of emptiness. At that point, regarding all phenomena, you will clearly understand their appearance. Everything as it appears is just like everything in a dream. You simply will not really cling to them, actually.
I have a question from one of my students. Homage to the kind Guru. Hello, Guru. May I ask, how should we view dreams?
Life itself is like a dream. To view life is to view a dream.
I am currently a teacher at Gansu United University. If possible, I would like to set up a spiritual cultivation center at the school. The main purpose is to help students accurately and thoroughly understand Buddhism and to cultivate their compassion in their daily lives. But I'm not sure what courses a spiritual cultivation center could offer. Specifically, which books should be selected and what kinds of activities can be organized.
Many universities actually have some Zen culture programs. For example, Peking University has set up some courses and activities for interested students to explore. And Fudan University also has a Zen Studies Society where students gather to study together regularly. I've seen that Huazhong University of Science and Technology in Wuhan, as you may know, even has a dedicated center for spiritual research. Actually, if your United University can set up a spiritual cultivation center in the future with proper support and resources available here, it could also be combined with Zen culture in meaningful and practical ways for students. Currently, in some higher education institutions regarding Zen culture, including Zen in daily life, Zen in tea culture, and Zen in corporate culture, these are all actually very easy to integrate. There are also important aspects of our inner spiritual world, such as the inner studies of Buddhism. In Tibetan Buddhism, for example, there are certain specific practices for cultivating bodhicitta, which is the mind of awakening and compassion. Actually, as I mentioned earlier, bodhicitta is a spirit of altruism. This altruistic spirit naturally brings peace to the hearts of students and teachers in profound and lasting ways over time. Because all of our human restlessness, worries, and anxieties come from our attachment to the self. If our attachment to the self gradually decreases through practice and awareness day by day, and altruistic actions increase, then the various troubles and pains that we feel in our hearts will gradually begin to lessen. When they decrease, our minds will slowly become more peaceful and calm. So when organizing activities, you can actually start with some lectures or talks, including inviting teachers who are knowledgeable and experienced in this area to share their insights. I know that here at Southwest Minzu University, there are also many masters who specialize in Buddhist studies and research on the mind with deep expertise accumulated over many years of dedicated practice. In other universities as well, there are many teachers who are very knowledgeable about Chinese culture, including Han and Tibetan traditions with profound understanding from years of study. In fact, Buddhist culture contains many concepts in this regard worth exploring carefully. I especially hope that in universities today, it's not just about specialized courses, but that there is also a real need for skillful and convenient methods alongside to cultivate in moral character over time gradually. If people take the initiative to cultivate and develop themselves in this area, it will definitely bring valuable benefits to society and to the entire country in the future. We also often find ourselves hoping in a variety of different situations and environments to improve as much as possible in this regard, always striving to make a positive contribution wherever we can. For example, recently, several teachers from Xiamen University and Peking University, as well as Lanzhou University of Science and Technology, have held many joint meetings on important topics. They focus on guiding education in schools to cultivate students' overall qualities, including moral character and spiritual development beyond just academics. Especially in terms of moral and traditional cultural qualities, which are important aspects of a person's overall development, it is crucial to pay attention to these values. Now, we must incorporate this kind of research in this area so that we can better understand its significance and impact. When many of our schools think about students' futures, they especially recognize the need for education in this area. If students have this, even if they can't find a job, they won't be too troubled about survival. Otherwise, if we only look at the test scores right now, I actually always feel there are many unreasonable aspects to this.
Respected Kenpo, hello. I am currently a graduate student majoring in chemistry at Northwest Normal University. During our studies, we have found that we are also very interested in Buddhism and traditional Chinese culture. However, we have encountered many challenges and difficulties in the process of learning. We have also tried to find and read many different books on our own. But after reading them, we often feel that we haven't gained much from them. So here, I would like to ask Kenpo a question. In your opinion, based on your experience, how can we choose classic books that are more suitable for university students to read? How can we study effectively to gain a more comprehensive understanding of the Dharma and Buddhism, so that we can benefit more from it in lasting ways?
With any kind of knowledge, if you just skim the surface and only pay attention to the basic parts, you might not really get deep into it or fully grasp what it truly means. So for you personally, you may not gain much from it. This isn't just true for Buddhism, even for worldly novels or any book in the world. If you simply just glance through it, your impression probably won't be very deep, probably not very lasting either. When I read books myself, I often think, this book must have its profound meaning, and maybe I don't understand it yet. That's why I stay very focused with full attention, even though I'm only reading a single section. Why is it written this way? Why is it said like this? In the end, I realize that when my mind is scattered outward in various directions constantly, I often fail to enter into its truly wonderful and fascinating realm. I think, first of all, maybe we haven't truly focused our attention. If you do focus, any kind of knowledge has its own unique brilliance, and it should truly be able to move people's hearts deeply, especially if you want to gain a systematic understanding of Buddhism. I often tell many friends as well, if you want to gain a deep understanding of Mahayana Buddhism, it's best to study the Bodhicariyavatara, the way of the Bodhisattva. If you want to understand the concept of emptiness, it's best to study the root stanzas of the Middle Way or the introduction to the Middle Way. If you want to systematically study some aspects of Tibetan Buddhism, then the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment or the words of my perfect teacher are recommended. It definitely requires many years of dedicated study. After delving deeply into it, the profound principles within can bring about significant changes to your body and mind.
Hello, Master. I recently watched a fascinating documentary that was titled Harmony Saving the Crisis. In it, Master Jingkong said that there are more and more disasters happening in the world today, including floods, snowstorms, and earthquakes. The reason why these disasters occur is entirely due to the ongoing decline and the gradual deterioration of human morality and ethical standards. I would like to ask you, Master, what evidence do you have that can actually prove it is indeed human actions and behaviors that have directly caused these kinds of disasters? This is my very first question. And my second question is, how can we effectively convince others that it is the decline in moral conduct that has led to these catastrophic events? And one more question. Can reciting scriptures or mantras and dedicating the merit to those affected by disasters really help to resolve these disasters? Thank you so much, Master.
First, what I would really like to share and explain to you is that in the story titled Harmony Saving the Crisis, the person who discusses these principles is Master Jingkong, not me. So for this evidence, you should ask Master Jingkong, because if I didn't say it, why should I be the one to explain it? But if you feel that, since you are a Buddhist, you must be the one to present the evidence. Master Jingkong is also a person, and so are you. If you look at it from the perspective of being human, it should also be explainable. This kind of reasoning is a method used in Buddhist logic. You can go back and think about it slowly. But as for the latter part of your question, I can also answer it for you indirectly. Because it is indeed mentioned in the Buddhist scriptures, as stated in the ancient texts, that when human morality deteriorates, various kinds of disasters do certainly occur. But in Buddhism, we do not claim 100% that all sources are entirely due to moral corruption. In fact, each individual's own past karma also plays a certain role. External actions also serve, functioning as supportive conditions, as external factors. As for such disasters, whether we can transform them through chanting mantras, reciting sutras, or performing good deeds is something we need to consider. We also shouldn't think that none of these methods have any effect at all. However, can we really say that chanting mantras will definitely be effective? We can't be completely certain about that either. It's just like when we take medicine when we're sick. People who don't really understand medicine might think that either it has no effect at all, or it works and cures everything 100%. But no medical expert would ever agree with that, because every person's illness is different and each case is unique. But it's true that taking medicine does have an effect. In Buddhism, chanting mantras, doing good deeds, and all Buddhist practices can be compared to a patient seeking medical treatment. When it comes to seeing a doctor, sometimes the treatment works and sometimes it doesn't. In the same way, when we do good deeds, sometimes they truly have an effect, but sometimes because the karma is too severe, they may not necessarily work. Still, we seek out these practices and good deeds for protection and blessings. It's just like a patient seeking medical treatment.
Thank you, Master. Due to time constraints, this concludes the Q&A for this afternoon. If everyone still want to hear more, you can continue to communicate with Kenpo through the internet and his Weibo. Let us once again give a warm round of applause to thank the esteemed Kenpo Sodargi for his wonderful speech. I believe that after listening to Kenpo's talk, everyone here has gained new insights and realizations about their hearts, their connection with others, and the world. May Kenpo's words be like a cup of cool tea in the heat of summer, bringing gentle coolness and soothing peace to our hearts. May the seed of wisdom sown by our teacher take root and sprout in the heart of every friend here. Let us all join hands and move forward together. Let go of self-attachment and embrace selfless altruism. Together, let us truly embrace a broader world together. Finally, let us all stand up and give a warm round of applause to respectfully see off Kenpo Sodargi.